Welcome to Biggest Geekast. We're your hosts. I'm Randy.
And I'm Joe.
This is episode 165 of our show, and the date is Tuesday, November 14th, 2023.
All right.
Nice crowd today, man. Halcyon's been in for a bit. Darth is in the house. Patrick's doing a little lurking action. Welcome.
He's lurking because he's working.
Yeah, lurking because he's working. Lady's going to be bouncing in and out. That's cool. He's welcome. And Martinson and Arn Man, I think, is what we got right now. Oh, phone guy. What's up, Daddy-O? Yeah.
The guy with the phone.
Oh, Halcyon has the ultimate question. When are we doing the Cabin Con meeting, our business meeting? We are going to push that off, buddy. I talked with a few of the guys because of the holidays. It was suggested that we push this off till post-holiday, so probably in January. It's going to be a late Cabin Con meeting, and I'm going to want your money pretty fast.
Hey, David Gwill says, here kind of, sort of, be hearing away randomly. I read your article, and I have presented it to Randy. I don't know if he's actually read it, since I showed it to him during the half hour previous to us starting. Right. So he probably hasn't read it. But what I'd like to do is go over it in our next episode.
Yeah, a little bit. I did a quick skim, David, but it looks like some good comments, like always.
Good comments.
You know, David's he's got a way with words. He's very good at not absurdly long. He sends me emails, and I really want to respond, but dang, he's so many good comments. I can never get to it. Hello, EME Inc.
Good stuff.
And Point Blank is in the house. That's cool. Oh man, so I had a pretty good weekend, and got to game a little on. Oh goodness, when did I play?
Saturday.
That sounds right. Saturday evening. Got to play with Patty's Parlor, Larry Elliott, and a couple of new guys that were pretty cool guys. DM Blackwall of Horde Wars, Blackwall Games, ran us through a short one-shot on Gilded, and we didn't do any video stuff. It was all through chat. And you know what? It was kind of cool. I kind of liked that experience. It was fun. You had to listen, had to pay attention, and it was better. It might have been, I don't know if it's better without video, but it was pretty good. I enjoyed it.
Are you experienced? Obscure song reference.
I know. I've heard of it, but I can't name it. But we had fun. We played first level characters, rolled them up. I played a acolyte priest and was a healer dude. Here's the sad thing.
You're an acolyte priest because with Horde Wars,
yep.
There's the acolyte is one class and priest is another class. You take two classes to build your character together.
Yeah. Sup, Hungar?
They're half classes, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and you can allows you to mix and match. You get. I was telling DM Blackwall that what I like about Horde Wars is it's like a third edition of D&D without the 40 billion options. You get a few options that are enough to feel like you can build a character. It's got a little bit of, I would say, a little bit of 13th age feel to it. The way I don't think you can make really bad choices. Hey, there's one of my role players, Patty. Played a cool little dwarf dude.
Patty's Parlor, Hungar the Starvarian, welcome.
Yeah, but I thought it was neat. It was kind of funny, Joe. My character was a vampire hunter. Now, in Horde Wars, you don't start out like a chump. I mean, you're pretty solid. I took the vampire hunter feature, and the first vampire, and we literally fought a vampire. It was complete luck. DM Blackwall rolled these different adventure options. We chose.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the fix is in. Because
why is that?
When I played it during Cabin Con, we ended up facing a vampire lord and his sidekick, a regular vampire.
Oh, well, we fought two regular vampires. Then we got the drop on a vampire seductress in his lair, and we smoked her butt. And then he got free, and man, I forgot the guy's name. He played a crusader guy. Had he not had that ability to block an attack or whatever,
yeah, that was key in ours as well.
That vampire lord would have ripped him. He could have killed one of us every round, and there's no doubt about it. But we had some,
perhaps even multiples.
Yeah, we did. Because he got like 2 sets of attacks every round. It was crazy. Patty was a heavy hitter for us. His dwarf guy, I think he was a hunter type dude, and Larry Elliott played. Orcs are really cool in their setting. Orcs can regain their hit points after a minute of rest. So,
Hmm.
hey, cooking with Cucky. I don't know that person, but welcome.
Uh-oh.
So, um,
That might be someone from one of the uh,
DV Army.
DVR or Shoo Shoo, one of those guys.
Hmm. Welcome. Yeah, Patty's a hunter, deep delver, but
Deep
it was a fun
Delver.
experience. Lots of
Scam
options,
bait. One of the scam baiters, perhaps.
but it was not difficult to. Hey, Tunka Todd, he's here for the live show. Excellent. But I was not disappointed. It was fun. I do think in the one shot environment, I thought we were moving kind of quickly from scene to scene. I would like to had a little more time to really get into the RP, but that's not everybody feels that way. We had some good combats, good little mission, got some decent treasure, and I may play that guy when we fire up our game. So I may make another one too. I don't know yet. But it was fun. Did you get to game at all this week at all, Joe? This past weekend? Joe?
No, I did not. Someone asked me to look at my Discord.
Oh, okay. They got your Discord checking.
They got me distracted.
Look at your Discord phone guy. He wants you to see this Discording. Mac Thompson,
I was
what's up, brother?
actually very correct
About
something I said earlier
Oh, okay.
about the cooking with Cucky.
Okay.
I mean, it just sounded like one of those guys, one of the scam baiters.
Cool. But yeah, so how was your week otherwise, Joe? Anything exciting and new?
Me being the outline guy.
I know that's pretty cool. I didn't do anything this week, just showed up.
That's fine. That's what the talent usually does.
Well, you know me. Just put me in front of the camera. I'll do my thing or not. But yeah. It's pretty timely. So I did watch a movie. Was it Sunday night? Do you recall the movie Stand By Me?
Yeah.
With the boys and going to the railroad tracks.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
kind of a different kind of Goonies.
That hits you in the feels though, man. It really does because I was like, it just not that we were like that. We were running around in the 80s, not the 50s, but it's like your old buddies and your kids and just having the whole day to screw around or a whole weekend to screw around. And I really like that. It made me want to, when I have my Christmas break, which won't be too far away. Makes me want to sit back and just watch some of the old movies I watched when I was, in the 80s and late 70s.
Well, like you say, that we weren't in the 50s, but we had the same kind of feel where
some
we
of the same
run around,
yep.
And there weren't parents on, around every corner looking over our shoulders. They were waiting at home for us to come home and then beat our butts for whatever we did that day. It usually didn't matter. You were out all day. Come here. I got to spank you because you probably
did something you deserved. Martinson said it was a Stephen King story. He's a big fan. I had noticed that too, Martinson. It was based on one of his books, but it wasn't called Stand By Me. I'm wondering if they changed it significantly.
Patrick, all of them, they all did. Because especially in that era back then, because he was just interested. He was happy to get his ideas sold into movies because it was cash for him.
Yeah.
Right. And he was a starving writer for a long time before he got popular. And you want this for a movie? I'll take it. I don't care what you do with it. He even said that. He doesn't care.
Well, he said it's he goes, if you want to know how the story was, read my book. And he's got a point. Called The Body. Thank you, Martin. Said it point blank. Let's see. Patrick Demo says only bad thing in the movie is Will Wheaton. Yeah, you know what?
I don't think so.
Little Will was good.
So.
Will was good. He was good in the movie, but I understand what you're saying.
I think that's a backwards projection everybody does because he's such a turd bucket these days. But he was fine in the movie. He wasn't great, but he was fine.
And the little chubby dude was Jerry O'Connell. That movie was loaded. It had River Phoenix, Jerry O'Connell, Will Wheaton, and then John Cusack was the older brother, and Kiefer Sutherland was the bad boy leader of the jerkwad gang.
It's been so long since
You
I've
should
seen it.
watch it. You should watch
Yeah,
it. It's a
it's a
good watch. I
right.
noticed that Netflix has Jaws now, so I'll probably watch that again. I usually do every year. So anyway, that's one of the things that I did. That was kind of, I don't know, it was just kind of cool. Got me wanting to watch the old movies. I might even start doing I might do a fantasy marathon. Get out if I can find Kroll and what is that? Beastmaster. I should just try to watch it. I may not be able to stand it though. What was the one I
I have
tried to
Kroll on
watch?
DVD.
Is Kroll
I
the
have
one that's
Kroll.
kind of a space fantasy,
It's
science fan?
space. It's
Yeah.
well, it's not exactly a space fantasy. It's mostly fantasy with a little bit of space mixed in.
I think I tried to watch that about a year ago and I couldn't get through it. Yeah, Dragon Slayer. That looks like a good one.
Mainly because some of the bad guys have laser guns,
Okay.
and then the bad guy's lair flies in from outer space.
And I remember when we watched that annoyed me. I used to not like science fiction mixed in my science fiction peanut butter in my fantasy chocolate. Yeah.
So you didn't. So you must not have liked the cartoon. I can't believe I can't remember it.
Heavy metal?
Not Heavy Metal, but the one that was on Saturday morning.
Thundar?
Thundar. That's a mix.
I know, but sorry about that. I liked Thundar.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that was pre D&D for me. It might have been D&D. I might have been playing D&D by then. Probably was.
It was around that. It was maybe a little bit before that.
I got the job. People are throwing me some good movies down here. Dragon Slayer. What did Iron Man say? 13th Warrior. That's quite a good one.
It's good.
Yeah. I got to write that down. Those are good.
So you remember in the movie where the one guy says, "How do you speak our language?" Right? I had a lot of people yelling at me because for the same reason. I can't believe that he learned their language so fast. I'm like, one, it's the movie. And two,
Yeah.
he was a diplomat. He probably was a bit of a linguist.
I imagine.
So you don't know how long. You know how long it takes to get across the sea when it's stormy and you're rowing?
Long time.
Probably took a month to get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if
Okay.
you're there for a month with someone and you have some skill at language, you could absolutely do it. Joe's like, no. Patrick Demo says, "Off the Slayer."
Hard pass.
I'll watch it, Patrick. Don't feel bad. I'll watch it with you. Oh, Patty says, "Oh, sorry, Joe. Go ahead. I'm stealing your thunder."
Miss Parlor, Patty's Parlor's Mrs. Say that fast. Wants to know if you guys liked Earth Girls Are Easy. It was okay.
I don't think I saw that. I think that was one of my list, and that may be one I have to get to.
That was one of those early 80s romantic comedies about aliens.
Yeah, tell her thank you for the suggestion. I may check it out.
Looks surprisingly like Earthlings.
Yeah. But, yeah, Patty, it was great playing with this past weekend. He was a good player. He was right into it, got into character, doing his thing. It was fun. It was nice to have those guys around. Oh, Deathstalker is getting a new comic book. I did not know that. My brother really wants to do Deathstalker 5.
Are they going to also do a movie? Because they have some Deathstalker movies.
They do.
I haven't seen any of them, but they're the 70s, early 80s, fairly cheesy fantasy movie like Sword and the Sorcerer.
Isn't Deathstalker, though, an image by Boris Vallejo? Or is it one of the other artists?
I could be wrong.
Maybe it's Brom. So. He's a guy with Brom. Horns and stuff. Yeah. Patty said he was going for a Swedish dwarf, but I ended up being Indian.
Oh, was that East Indian or was that Native American Indian?
I think he was talking about being Indian.
Okay, so that's
kind of like that.
East Indies Indian.
I think so. So, what's up, Boivin?
Mr. Boivin.
Oh, Halcyon called it out. Actually, I like both of them. I like the original Clash of the Titans, and I like the new one. The second sequel, not so much. But I did like the first one.
There was a second sequel, right?
There was a remake that was Sam Worthington.
Yeah.
I think in 2000 something, and then he made a sequel. Not as great, but you know what? For cheesy fantasy, can't go wrong. You know, so
Yeah, we talked about Kroll. I
yeah.
like it. Randy doesn't
You know what?
because it has too much sci-fi in it.
I'm gonna. I've mellowed over the. When I was younger, I did not like a mix. I don't know if I told you guys this, or you in particular, Joe. You probably remember this. I hated Expedition to the Barrier Peaks. Hated that
It
adventure.
had sci-fi elements in it.
Yeah, and I was like,
You could get ray
robots.
guns and stuff.
This is dumb. And yeah, that's when I was becoming a kind of a snooty elitist in my D and
Now,
D.
these days, you would like it from the point of view as you could throw unique enemies at us. You probably would say all the technology doesn't work.
Probably that's kind of how I do.
Hey, here's a ray gun. In the module, you get 5 shots with it. With Randy, it doesn't work.
It's completely empty.
Sorry about your luck.
Doesn't work. Oh well.
You
And there's
find
no
this
way.
thing that doesn't work.
Yeah, it's got a crystal that charges it up. With that crystal's, it's burnt.
It's like wizards that you can't find their spell book when you beat them.
Why
Same
should
thing.
you really? Why should you really? That's
Why
the
should
idea. Yeah. What's up, Cigar DM? Glad you're in, brother. Oh no. I don't know if I can sit
I
through that
wasn't
one.
a Conan. I wasn't Conan. I was going to say Conan. I'm sorry, Conan. I didn't mean to-
Conan. Got to watch that.
But Master of the Universe was a horrible cartoon,
I think
and that was a worse movie.
Oh yeah.
But
Now,
you know, there's a lot of people who liked Masters of the Universe, He-Man, and all that, and they probably liked that movie. But
I like
thought it
Conan the Destroyer too. It wasn't a good
horrible.
movie, but it was a fun. It felt like a D&D adventure.
That was, I think, before Dolph Lundgren actually kind of hit his stride as
Rolf
an
Lundgren.
actor, and could Rolf Lundgren.
Did Dolph ever hit his stride?
He had some movies where he was okay.
Wasn't the Punisher in one movie?
He was, yeah, he was.
Punisher.
It took a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, Schwarzenegger hit his stride a lot earlier,
Look,
a lot quicker
Yeah.
quicker in his career.
oh, for sure. Cigar DM says he grew up. Yeah, I get it. And Darth made a good point. I didn't even know Masters of the Universe. He said it was a fun movie. They completely butchered. Yeah, I knew. I was like, this doesn't make any sense at all. And what is
But-
He-Man doing in modern times? That was
Teenage
dumb.
Mutant Ninja Turtles did the same thing.
No, I didn't care for them.
So those movies were not anything like the earlier comics. And then I think they made a cartoon series that was more based on the movie series than the comic series, right?
Probably. From what I've not read, look, I'm just not a Turtles guy. And look, I wish Palladium the best. But Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and After the Bomb, none of that interests me, not even a little bit. And I know people on here are very pumped about it. It's cool. Do your thing.
I think it'd be a fine game to play. It'd be
Do you?
As a one shot. I'm just.
Maybe.
I'm,
I
I'm
would
more,
play. I would play it. I just would never. There's no way I would run it.
Yeah,
Not
I'm more
really.
crapping on the original IP as far as well, not Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'm crapping on Masters of the Universe IP.
Yeah. Oh, actually, as an RPG, I would probably play Masters of the Universe over TMNT as an RPG.
Well, it's more in your bailiwick than TMNT is.
Though it's science fantasy too.
Yeah. The comics were dark and violent. The cartoons were more for kids. And so were the movies. I thought the movies were okay. The first one was all okay.
Patty, I challenge you. He says, I would play anything as a one shot for sure. Would you play Horse Girl, the RPG?
Oh boy.
You better say no.
Shots fired.
Don't play that game, dude. You want nothing to do with that.
Well, this could be true. Mr. Max says, I think for TMNT it was the other way around. The cartoon came first and the movie was based on the cartoon, but a little closer to the comics. That's possible. I don't know.
I know
I
Darth.
don't know the timeline.
Technically, it is, Patty. It's a what is it called? Journaling RPG.
Let's write our feelings down.
Iron Man, he's right. Horse Girl, Iron Man says Horse Girl belongs in everybody's stable of games. Yeah, keep it in the stable underneath the hay is what I
So
say.
so my wife loves horses
Yes,
and
she
she
does.
loves RPGs
Mm-hmm.
and she's into anime
Mm-hmm.
and all kinds of stuff that um, our generation of dudes would be like, not really. I mean, some of our friends like
Yeah, we got a
the
lot of friends.
anime,
I
but a
don't.
lot of us don't. And but I told her about Horse Girl,
What did she
and
think?
her eyes rolled so hard we had to take her to the emergency room.
It's beyond dumb, dude. But hey, what are you gonna do? It's that ley line press. That's how they do. Um, I did. I was gonna say something. Oh, the turtles. There's another story, real quick, guys. On the turtles, I may have said this. I remember walking into a comic shop the day Eastman's and or at least the week Eastman and Laird's Mutant Ninja Turtles hit the stands. There was one copy left. And the comic guy at my local shop in Indiana said, "Hey, Randy, you might want to check it out. It's this one's selling pretty hot." It was the first print, black and white, first issue. I picked it up, had it in my hands. I'm like, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He goes, "No, it's really pretty dark and cool." I'm like, "Yeah, someone else can have it."
See,
Oh, I know. I've done that
and
with Magic, Alpha Magic. Yeah.
so my wife will say, "Do you like this band and that band and the other band?"
Hmm.
So you looked at it and said, "Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles." That sounds stupid.
Yeah.
I do that with bands.
Right.
Crocus. That sounds stupid.
They are stupid.
And anything like Megadeth. I don't like death. I mean, that means more death. No, thank you. And of course, she
Yeah.
thinks that's a weird way of liking a band, but
I guess.
and it is because you really should base it on how they're. If you like the way they do their music,
I
which
was a
I don't for the most part.
I thought at that time, I thought, the X-Men were the only comics in the universe. Everything else was cheeseball stuff. So to be fair, I had no taste. And if the older Randy had been there, he would have tried it because it was a bigger comic and it looked cool.
Okay, so Flady says he bets that the horse girl was inspired by the kid in Bob's Burgers. Okay, are you talking about one of the children of the main character? I wouldn't know who you were talking about there, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, right,
Yeah.
Flady. Like picking your football team winners by who has the cooler helmets.
Yeah. When I,
It makes a lot of sense, but that's just what you do.
to be fair, when I was young and even in that age, I was a collector of titles, not a collect. I didn't think about the writers. And so I just followed the X-Men, whoever wrote them, I thought was great. Um, but uh, when I got older, because I've had stints where I've started and stopped. So in the end of my college career, when I was first got my first teaching job, I told Joe I got back into comics, but I followed a lot of writers then. I had writers that I liked, and so I would read a run, and if it wasn't good, I'd bounce. And I want to give a shout out to Alpha Core One for Eric July. That is still you can still purchase any cover you want. That's written by the great Chuck Dixon, in my mind, of Batman and Robin
Bat-
fame. So,
Batman and Robin fame,
but I'm excited about that. So,
not Batman and Robin the movie
no,
because that sucked.
I think Dixon gets credit for actually pretty much starting the single Robin stories. He was a big.
Oh,
He did.
really?
Yeah. He was the one that did the first giant run of Robin solo
Oh,
comic
I
back in the
remember.
'90s.
I remember listening to some Eric July, and he was talking about that. Right, right,
Yeah, I
right.
liked Chuck Dixon, Norm Brayfogle, Doug Minch, who I think passed not too long ago. So yeah.
So Flady clarifies and says one of the kids in Bob's Burgers,
Hmm.
they have a version of bronies. And if you know what a brony is,
Yes.
dudes who are really, really, really into My Little Pony. So they have a version of that in that cartoon, and they write fanfic, but it's apparently erotic fanfic.
Yeah. Point Blank mentions that Dixon also wrote Birds of Prey. It was great too. Probably back when, well, if Chuck Dixon wrote it, it was good. I mean, I'm telling you, I love that dude's writing. Jim Lee is more of the. He had a cool, iconic. He did some iconic art for Batman in the New 52 and beyond. Jim Lee's art is good. I don't know him as a writer, but as an artist, he's excellent in my opinion. But anyway,
Right.
I think we're supposed to talk about gaming, aren't we tonight?
Yeah, yeah, we're kind of getting into side issues here, but that's
Mhm.
fine. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So the question in this episode is in segment number 1: what makes a great setting? Setting up a great setting is the title of our episode today, but the
Hey,
segment is what makes a great setting.
can I?
So
I don't know if are you gonna tell them your impetus for doing this? I thought it was interesting to think about for
okay,
us.
so
I thought Joe
before
wrote
we
this outline. I
started
thought it was cool.
before
So
we started doing the online thing, whether it was podcasting or here on YouTube, both of our wives said that we should do this because we spend a lot of time just talking about gaming, and a lot of time what was it when it was your mother, and we were talking when we were young in Indiana, we would talk till after dark
uh-huh.
on your front porch,
Yep.
and your mother would pop her head out and say, "What are you guys talking about? We're fixing D&D, Mom."
Yeah.
Right. So we've
We're
been
fixing
doing
it.
this for decades.
Yeah.
And so
Hell, I
instead,
even remember this. I'm starting to. You remember this, Joe? You would when you would get some time when Joe moved away with the military, he would call me just every once or twice a year, and we would chat. And we hadn't even talked to each other for a while. We'd talk about life for about this much,
yeah,
and then it would turn into D&D all the
yeah,
time.
all the time.
Yeah.
And it'd be long conversations about
Hmm.
this, that, and the other thing, D&D wise.
Hmm.
And so we decided to turn that into this. Well, it was first just a podcast, and then we were here on YouTube. So we kind of got away from that in talking about current events within the industry. And honestly, we don't really care. So it's kind of hard to keep any kind of real em- emotional attachment. I mean, we're enthusiastic about D&D, but we're not enthusiastic about any individual in the industry or what somebody thinks about it
Hmm.
at all. So if somebody says, "Oh, white supremacy," blah 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 blah, with the history of D&D, we're like, okay, who cares?
Yeah. It sounds like
Um,
you're on crack.
why should
So
a long sword be a D8 and a short sword be a D6? That's much more interesting conversation to us than the other thing.
right.
And we don't have any kind of enthusiasm about that stuff.
You know,
So,
we get frustrated.
mhm,
Say I get triggered more than Joe does. But having said that, the truth is like, and Ryan David, shout out to his podcast today. I listened to a lot of it. Watsy is doing stuff, and they're still in the midst of it. They're just not on my radar. I'm losing my interest at all in Watsy. They have to do
mhm,
something pretty huge for me to care. I know we'll talk about it, but the truth is, D&D is kind of the actual product, the current product. I just don't care. Do whatever you
right,
want.
right. And if somebody wants to make a horse girl journaling RPG, I think it's stupid, but whatever.
Whatever. Do your dumb
I'm
stuff.
much more interested in what our topic tonight is about, which is
Hmm.
setting. And we talk about different types of settings all the time when Randy and I talk offline, and over the years we've talked all
Yep.
kinds of things about settings, what we like,
Always.
what we don't like. Most of the time, it's published settings publish too much
Yep.
stuff. And I know Randy, you said that you don't like to step on the toes of the writers, or you don't feel like it's intimidating. Probably isn't the right word, but
No.
it's more like if everybody
Obligated.
knows.
I feel
So an
obligated.
obligation, especially when you're like, hey, you go to this village and you name it, and you're like, there's somebody at the table who knows everything there is to know about that setting.
Forgotten
There's
Realms.
no
Yeah.
village in this region called that. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah. But
Elminster's never around here.
to be
Elminster's actually 6'4", not 6'3". How what's wrong with you?
yeah.
Stuff like that. You don't. It's annoying more than anything else.
For me, it's a catch-22. So if you take Forgotten Realms, I'm not one of those people. I don't hate the realms. They're
Right,
fine.
right.
There's a lot of TSR settings that I liked. I collected a bunch of them, as I said before in the past. And if I were to run them as written, and people say, "Oh, don't run them," run your own game. I get it, you can. And even on the surface, I'm like, yeah, if I were to run Star Wars, I would just change all kinds of crap. But then I'm like, why? It was really good the way it was. Why do I want to change it? I think for me, I just feel like if I really like a setting, I kind of want to run it the way it's written because it's kind of cool. And I do have a collector mentality, which I'm working on defeating. So I used to have a lot of box sets set in the Realms and in Greyhawk and all these others. And I was like, then you're like, I got all this stuff, then I got all this homework I got to do. I mean, I feel
Right.
this way. I got to read everything. I got to know everything.
Because there's folks at the table who probably know more about the setting than you do.
Correct.
Right,
Hmm.
right, right.
Hmm.
I'm going to answer a question here or a point.
Hmm.
Darthic, the only reason any of us gamers get triggered over gaming is simply because we care about the games and want them to improve, not degrade. I agree.
Hmm.
Um, it only grinds my gears for about 2 minutes, but a lot of people are different, and
Hmm.
everybody can have their own conversations. I'm not saying any of this to put anybody down or put them in a bad light if that's what makes them, or if that's what you're enthusiastic about talking about. That's fine. That's just not us. And I think we're better when we are talking about the minutia of the game itself, not or in other RPGs too,
Yeah.
not necessarily the happenings out there in the world that don't affect us.
And I don't think, and Joe can't, I mean, Joe can, if you guys have watched this for a while, my mom says I come by my red hair naturally. So I have a bit of a temper and I've really tamped it down over the years, but I have one. And you guys have seen me get worked up and passionate. But the truth is, I'm getting to where we've talked about it. I just don't, I'm not saying you can't bring it up and I'm not saying we won't bring stuff up, but I agree with you, Joe. I think we're going to be better if we dig into what we really like. And that's the minutia and the details of a game, of a campaign world. Like you said, should a great sword be a D10 or should it be a 2D6? I mean, I don't know what's better.
More damage is better.
Always err on the
Always.
side of more powerful characters.
Of course.
Yeah.
So
But
yes, so that's last week we talked about magic. This week we're talking about settings. Next week we're going to talk about combat. And tonight we're also going to have a segment 2 where we're going to revisit the magic conversation of last week with some specifics. So the idea is that we don't want to just flap our gums. We want to do that too, but these questions and ideas that we are going to put forth hopefully will lead us will take us from A to B, A being no rules on paper, B being rules on paper that we can use at some point.
Right.
And we'll probably have multiple conversations about settings, and we might today is going to be a Mile High View. Maybe some future episode
we'll dig
take
down
one thing out of this and we'll be able to wax rhapsodic about it. Randy I might, ramble.
Yeah.
Like
before we do further, Iron Man made a good comment, and this is where, in theory, I fully agree with him, but I have a hard time doing this. He says, I've only run games in my own settings, but borrow heavily from other settings. I'm sorry, I'm changing a little bit. I am the only lawyer in existence that way. True. I would, if I were giving advice to a young DM, I would say, do you like Dark Sun? Run Dark Sun. There's too much stuff. Run it any way you want. Do anything you want. It's your Dark Sun. I agree. I'm just saying, Randy, when I was in my heyday, I'm like, I know all this stuff. I love reading all the setting. Patrick mentioned something about reading regional books for Palladium Fantasy, but you just get, it's my own thing. It's my own hang up. But I'm more with Joe. I mean, I do think make your own stuff. Go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry. Go.
Right. And there was that comment 2 episodes ago where someone said, hey, talk about the way you should develop is XYZ, magic setting combat, maybe something like that. I can't remember.
That was Iron Man said we should do.
Iron Man.
I think he said setting combat magic, which is probably not a bad way to build a setting. I'm secretly hoping Joe inspires me. We actually had I'm not going to mention it. We had an inspiration for a setting in quotations that he and I could kind of do.
Can riff off each other
at the same time, but we're going to talk about that later. It's not even. It's just a little
idea germ,
nugget of an idea. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe a neutrino.
Correct.
So small. It's very tiny.
Right.
Also, David Quill posted on his blog, not responses, but ideas riffing off of our magic system episode from last week. And I'm going to post that here if I can.
Yeah, it's a nice long article that I need to read. So
there is a link. It went out to YouTube and the purple icon that I can't remember because I'm a
Twitch.
freaking old dude. Twitch, yeah.
Yeah. It's because
Um,
I'm a master of technology now, Joe. That's what it is.
what I'm going to do is also go over to Rumble and post it because if I can, let me see if it lets me. Yes. All right. So also over on Rumble, if you're listening, click on that, go read it. He has some good comments over there about Magic Systems.
Yes.
All right. So we're going to talk about setting. So I think as a mile high view and an initial question you can ask, what kind of games, uh, such as Dominion building, exploration, dungeon crawling, what kind of games are you going to want to play, and what sort of tone do you want the setting to evoke?
Yeah, and for me that comes down to what kind of adventures do I want my adventures to be going on.
Right.
I mean, to drill down to the actual setting. So I think you have to. I think I've a lot of time when I've made my own settings, I didn't think of that, but it came out. If I can go back and think about it, I ran a campaign. I used the Shadow World of Colthea, but I created my own world, and it ended up flowing into Planescape when Planescape became new. But it had all the seeds of plane traveling anyway, because that's always been deep buried within me that I love the planes. I love high level, adventuring. So for me, a world for Dominion play is fine, but it's going to have to expand beyond. I mean, it has to expand beyond dungeon crawls. Any campaign I run, it will. I mean, Joe knows I rarely even run a dungeon.
Mm-hmm.
I do a lot of
these days. Yeah,
it's rare.
It's usually something a bit more epic. You might have a dungeon element in there, but it's not like, hey, there's a dungeon over there that just opened up, ready for adventurers to hit and get all the loot out of.
Let's go jump into Undermountain and run 400,000 encounters under Undermountain. I'm not going to do that. Right. And so for me, I think, that's a big, I don't know if, do you think it's something that people, let's throw it out to the chat. I wonder if people run different, if you're playing D&D, a D&D style fantasy game, and you want to change up campaigns, are you able to easily switch gears? Like, this is going to be focused toward the characters owning their own castle, being the head of a bishop of a religion, being a head of a thieves guild. In the next campaign, hey, we're going to do dungeon crawl adventures and get to high level or mid level and quit, or we're going to explore the world. I mean, do people think like that? I wonder if no, that's not that's the wrong question. Are people able to switch that up? Because I find that it's not as easy for me. I'm kind of predictable.
So it's changing gears. I mean, all these Dominion play, exploration, dungeon crawl, they can all be part of the same campaign, right? Because you can start off dungeon crawling, especially in the first place you go to, which is always going to be a tavern, and they're going to have some rats to kill underneath it, right?
Always.
Always. And then when you have gotten to the King Rat, there's a dungeon under here nobody knew about.
Right.
And then you go explore the dungeon because that's what you do. And that's how you start play. You get into some Dominion and exploration later on when you're a little more powerful and can go out there and face, at the very least, you're not going to get crushed by everything. So you can handle yourself out there in the wilderness a lot better, perhaps, as a mid to high level character rather than a low level character, because you just never know what you're going to meet.
As a new DM, I would argue, and I think the game itself was constructed this way, dungeons are a good place to begin. Killing the rats, let's put that in quotation, the rats adventure, go into a dungeon, under the cellar, into the church, under the church, catacombs below. That's a good way to control the environment so they can't go all over the place. You know what's there, and you can still let them riff and do their own thing, but you have them in a, in a maze. You have them trapped where they can't throw you off, and you can see what you like about it, or if you don't. Like me, I'm not a huge fan of dungeon crawling. I'm just not. I like for it to be a small part of my campaigns.
Right. Mainly, I think, because when you're in a dungeon, who cares what the setting is?
Correct.
Because you're underground.
Right.
Dirt and rocks look the same just about everywhere. I mean, you can probably, if you have some other elements of your setting decided, so if um, I don't know. To come up with something off the cuff right now, it's going to be difficult. But let's say I've thought of heavily about having the magic system being runic.
Yes.
So that could be in the dungeon.
Yep.
So you might have to solve some rune puzzles, and there might be some runic things in there that evoke the setting, the larger setting. But in your dungeons, is probably going to be light on the setting. And a
Yeah.
lot of people like running through dungeons and don't care about setting. They just
Yeah.
run through dungeons.
Well, Darth says this, and to that exact idea, some people are able to switch up game style. I, as a DM, when offering something other than dungeon crawls, most players don't seem interested. Yeah, Darth has said before, and he said at Big Geek Con, he said he has players that just kind of. I mean, I think you're kind of stuck. Are you stuck playing 3-5? Not that you're stuck, but is that the game of choice with your
Situation.
players? I think you mentioned 3-5, or was it fifth edition? I don't know which one he said. Um,
It's kind of weird that they're not interested in anything else, because you can abstract everything to be an adventure, whether it's below ground, above ground. You have encounters, you have rooms. They're essentially the same kind of thing. Once you start rolling dice, so when you have your encounter, whether it's because you're in a new room or in a hallway,
mhm.
or you've come to a clearing and there's something going on there, you got to stop, or a monster jumps on you when you're sleeping out in the wilderness. Once all of that stuff is once the dust settles and you're rolling dice, I don't see why anyone would care one way or the other
About the setting.
about whether they're underground or above ground.
Uh,
Once you start rolling dice and doing combat, especially if that's what you're focused on, you can get to it just as fast above ground. You just run around until your DM rolls a random encounter, or you do your scouting and you get to scout out the orc encampment that you're searching for.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see why it would make a big difference to anybody.
Well, I mentioned this to Joe. A lot of stuff that I developed, and our style of running a game would be very different.
Mhm.
Joe would love tables and random things and not worrying too much about details. I love to think about the details. In fact, Arnman made some comments. This is what I do. He says there are probably a list of basic inclusions we could develop. Create a kingdom, an enemy, potential, maybe another kingdom, a third kingdom that could help with trade and dominion play. Yeah, develop that up. And he even said on the list you could add undeveloped wilderness areas. Absolutely. I'm always thinking about this one. Possible main antagonist ideas. Yeah, that's kind of where I go to first. And
Yeah,
often
yeah.
I'm a high level thinker, so I'll be like, who's going to be the main bad guy? Not that the players may not just throw me a monkey wrench, but I'm like, I've got to have something to sink my teeth into to build encounters that I find inspiring, whether the
Yeah.
players give a crap or not about whether it's connected to the world. It needs to be for me connected
So
to the
yeah,
world.
and when we're navigating through a city
Mm-hmm.
to find where we're supposed to go to next,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever we're doing. Let's say we're coming off of one adventure and we go to the tavern and
You're
we're
looking
doing
for
some
something
role
to
play.
do. Yeah.
That's all navigation,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you hit your point where this is where we're supposed to go, or this is where we are going to go, whether it's supposed to or not. This is where we're going, and it's not that much different from navigating a dungeon.
Yeah.
I mean, you're navigating. It's just it's thematically different.
Yeah.
You
Bob
still
Ann's
you have to get from A to B one way or the
Bob
other.
Ann's sticking it to me. That did sound kind of cocky, didn't it? Randy, the high level thinker. That's not what I meant, but he understands. Yeah, the big
Yeah.
picture guy. I can't. Like people say, one thing I don't do well, I can do a little. Well, yeah, okay. I shouldn't say that because my module, Tragedy at Tygon's Falls, which is still available at Big Geek Emporium, you should pick it up. I did start with the classic build a little town and start from a town. At least my ideas were little, just a small region.
Yeah.
But
Start with them,
honestly,
get big.
that was mostly due to this guy because he was like, just think of this idea. And because Joe threw a couple of nuggets at me that I just ran with.
Mhm.
But he often, this is not a put down, Joe thinks small. And what I mean by that is not a knock. He thinks in a small area, right? Little
Mhm.
picture, little town. What are we doing here? Whereas I want to think, oh, this is the big things that are happening in the world and the trickle down economics. Right, here's what's going to happen as it comes down, and my players will follow these little breadcrumbs and they will face off against Smaug. You know, that's my at 17th level. It'll be epic. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, I think
If
there's
we
a
ever get there.
if you ever get there, right? Which that's really annoying me too. I want to play OSC. I don't care what it is. We need to play and get to high level.
Well,
But anyway, side
there
note.
is no high level in OSE.
Oh, there will be if I run it. There'll be 200th level characters. You better believe it.
All these OSR, OSE clone type games, they stop at 12th level is the highest any of them I've seen any of them go.
Well, to be fair, it's really going to be Mud Sword. You can see it already. It's going to be changing. So my table's already different than OSC. So, but anyway, yeah, I think you have to pick. I think a dungeon crawl is a good place to start. I like what Arnman said. I like to build some things that are big, and then I have places the characters. So when a character asks me, "Well, what's beyond the river?" Oh, you don't cross beyond the river. That's the region of the Terathites. They are just horrible people, and they kill the first people. They kill anybody from our kingdom that goes across there. Do not cross the river. And
right. So some of those things are like tone, right? So
yes,
tone of the campaign.
correct. Mm-hmm.
High magic, low magic.
Yeah.
Is it provincial? So are we talking about people who don't like outsiders for the most part, or is it more cosmopolitan? Oh, I'm getting towards more like the bottom or more.
That's okay.
But those are tone issues too.
Yes.
So if you even care about that, setting a particular tone from the start.
I do. That's important to me as a DM.
So you can. There's an easy way to start really big with the tone of the whole campaign by having the big bad evil guy come and put his foot down and stomp your village into the dirt.
Right.
And
Correct.
so the tone of the whole tone of the campaign is this guy's got to go.
Yeah. Nothing like a 15th level wizard show up in your first level adventure and blow the town away and say, "Look, if you send any more adventures to my White Plume Mountain, you'll pay for it," and then leave. Because the party at first level, when he cast Meteor Swarm on their tavern, they're not going to be looking to go fight him.
No.
So
well, they're not going to be if they are actually in the area of effect of a Meteor Swarm. First level characters,
True.
They're not going to be looking at anything.
Heck, even a fireball, a 9th level wizard casts fireball, they'd be like, "Ooh, he's too tough for
minimum
us."
damage. We'll kill most of them.
But let's take a note who's that guy is. We'll be looking for you, Cracker.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. So something I did right before we started was gather up a few pictures.
Oh, cool.
Because some ways you can get your tone, if you don't already have that set, is you can look at weird art. So you can do that on Pinterest is where I looked at just before here because I was kind of scrambling where I could look. I guess you can look at deviant art, or you could just Google like fantastic images. But I went and let me see if I can get this put up on and share it.
Show us, sweet.
Want to share?
Sharing. Darth has a cool comment that's going to lead into one of our discussions. I started. Joe's trying to share. He needs someone with my technical skill to help him out. That's what it is. I'm just so talented in all ways.
So can you see that?
Ooh, me like it.
So this one is a picture of a dragon's carcass having been made into a city.
Oh, is that what that is?
Yeah.
I thought it was a giant. I thought it was a giant undead dragon. I like that idea better. Notice how the same picture could even be, even if it's not what it seems to be. I'm like, ooh, that needs to be. Oh, that is cool.
So it's that one. Whoop, wrong way. So I'm not sure how evocative that is of the entire setting, but it's more food for thought.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So what who would be living in something like this?
A druid.
Who would have built it?
Right.
How old is it?
And you say, I want those things to exist in my world.
Right.
Yeah, great sword. Ooh, what is that? Is that a statue? Is that a person that has been magically held in stasis until the time is right?
Right.
Maybe it's a waterfall. It looks like a
It's a
waterfall to me.
waterfall.
That's neat. Yeah.
So it's a little bit reminiscent of Lord of the Rings
Yeah.
in a way with their really big statues, but the kind of inscription behind it can
Yeah.
be evocative as well.
Yeah. That's some great picks, Joe. You're right. That's perfect. That
So
looks
here's
almost
something
like
else.
this. That looks like Sharn of the City of Doors.
Yeah,
I could
it
I
could
could
easily
picture
be
that in.
something like that.
I could picture that. Yeah.
This could even be. This is probably a little bit closer to like a steampunk
Yeah.
or a Victorian age,
Yeah.
or maybe whatever right before Victorian.
Yeah.
And that took me 5-10 minutes to just pick a couple of pictures out. You can spend a
Yeah.
little bit more time to make it probably uh, more evocative for you.
Yeah.
And have a all I had was fantastic scenery.
Well, dude, look
So
at the guys in chat and me. As soon as you showed the picture, I was like, ideas, ideas, ideas. Iron Man said something I thought was really cool. He said, what was it? The antagonist on that dragon picture is working on the ritual to animate the undead dragon. I said, oh, yeah, dude. That would be so good. Yeah. Yeah. And Patrick made a comment about that guy with the sword. That's the waterfall dude. Looks a lot like the Argonath in Lord of the
Argonath. I
Rings.
just couldn't remember the name, but
Yeah.
yes,
Well,
thank you.
he got it. He figured it out. Patrick's pretty Lord of the Rings savvy.
So you if you need help figuring out a tone, you can. There's all kinds
Yeah.
of sources out there for that.
Yeah. All those struck me as wondrous and epic. So it called to me. It was all epic.
Hmm.
I didn't see anything like um, it didn't look small, right? But that's
It's
also
big,
my eyes, right?
big.
It
Yeah.
looks big, and I see everything often in epic tones. Welcome back, Mac Thompson. We were looking at some sweet pictures to inspire the tone of your campaign.
So and
But
then you can just think of. I didn't type this in because there's a little bit more skin that maybe we want to show here.
sure. Mhm.
But if you type Boris Vallejo
Oh yes.
in, you can get some inspiration there for a tone.
Yeah.
Or Conan.
But
It's a different
you
tone.
do like that because that's his is very manly stuff, even if it's a little
Right, right.
risque. All
It's
his men
yeah,
is mighty thewed warriors
mighty thews
and mighty naked women most of the time.
who
So
are
yeah,
hanging on to the mighty thewed
right.
legs. Yeah.
That's the classic. That's a classic pose, right? Dudes on
Yeah. Well,
all these
it's
skeletons of guys
also
he's
how
killed.
they
She's
it's
holding his
also how
leg.
they did the Star Wars,
Oh yes,
the
true.
initial Star Wars
Very
thing,
true.
even though he absolutely didn't have mighty thews at
No,
all.
Luke Skysclumper.
Luke Skywalker had nothing mighty about him
No,
except for his lightsaber.
right. Um, Iron Man's kind of. I mean, if you're thinking we can go to this next idea, if you're ready, I just thought I would throw this at you. Iron Man says the scientific level of the world also matters. Joe's thought about that. Maybe
Yeah.
using magic, but how does that affect daily life? Right on.
So with the relative tech level of the world, you could think of, are you even going to say magic is the new tech?
Right.
And then your world becomes, magic street lamps,
Right.
magic refrigerator type things.
Magic
Um,
brooms that sweep up
do
their
you make it the
home.
present world, but magic is replacing tech, which I think is kind of a yawn fest for me. I'd rather it not be that.
Yawn Fest, why though? For
Uh,
a fantasy setting or just because it's
Yeah,
been
yeah.
overdone?
Or no, it's just you're just saying it's the present day or it's the modern world.
Oh, okay. I got you. Yeah, no, that doesn't interest
But
me.
that's fine if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
Army of Darkness is another good tone.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the Army of Darkness world that has a kind of alternate past for Earth,
Yeah.
kind of. But yes, so are you doing medieval?
Right.
Are you doing sword and sorcery, which are two different things?
Yes.
Are you doing sword and planet, which I think D&D even by itself could probably emulate sword and planet fairly well. You probably don't have to
Well,
change.
I think D&D really did at its beginning. It was sci-fi fantasy, so that's Sword and Planet. I believe that John Carter of Mars was one of the inspirations in Appendix N. So
Right.
yeah, I think D&D, the early D&D for sure. Anything first edition or earlier was definitely, you know, Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, if I mentioned before. It's absolutely could do Sword and Planet. That's not my preferred form, though I have a appreciation of it. I think even the Dying Earth with Jack Vance had a kind of a sword sci-fi. It's been a while
Sure,
since I've
sure.
read.
Even the wizards ran around with swords, and they were good with their swords.
Yeah,
Which they didn't pay attention to that for D&D.
I like. Yeah, I like quasi medieval of those three options. That's my favorite. But I could see a sword and sorcery campaign being fabulous, and a sword and planet. I mean, when I was younger, I thought John Carter of Mars sounded really dumb, but now that I've read a lot of the books, I could that could be fun.
So, can you think of any other kind of
To,
category you could put on this continuum?
how about something? So you got a continuum of medieval. Well, you could do prehistoric. What if magic is new, pre-medieval? What if you're like living in villages and the monsters are
So, Dark Ages.
kind of a Dark Ages type? Yeah, it could be a variety of that. So yeah, Dark Ages might be pre-medieval. I don't
Yeah,
know the
yeah, that would be cool. Dark Ages.
and so there, magic, and in that world, Dark Ages magic could actually be the things man we're not meant to know. If you want to put a spin on that, you could add a little cosmic horror to that time. I would
Just
think
don't
that'd
say
be
Dark
appropriate.
Age around some historians because they
No,
say it's not a thing
oh
or isn't the
well.
thing that we think it is.
Luckily, I'm a
Anyway,
math teacher.
yeah,
I have no dog in that fight.
right. So, what about more toward the higher end of magic? So, is there
Hmm.
some? I can't think of one off the top of my head.
The best I would call something like it takes medieval and spins it to high level. Take the realms. I mean, there's a lot of powerful magic there. Even a world where you don't have to have magic tech, but where like wizards are a dime a dozen. Nobody blinks an eye if a wizard teleports into to Waterdeep. As long as he's
Right.
not being aggressive, and if he is being aggressive, he might run into some stuff he can't handle. So, I mean, a world that's like highly magical, where the big cities have all this, and there you might have a
Like
little.
Eberron.
Yeah. Oh, Eberron is perfect. Like that's a Magitech world, though. That's
Yeah.
something you say you don't like, but it's definitely got it. I think that could work out really, really, really well. I mean, that's a different. It's not medieval. It's definitely not swords and sorcery. It's not swords and planet, but it's high end, high fantasy. Almost like magic is. It's accepted. It's a part of the deal. And in a world like Galarion for Pathfinder, that could even extend to the magic item economy. I mean, I don't necessarily like it, but I think you could have a very viable world where you could buy and sell magic items, and it's a thing that is done. There's prices for +1 swords. People have them. You can sell them.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, here's one.
Right.
Iron Man mentions, which I don't know if that fits Dark Ages or not. Low magic. That could be something. You could have a world where magic is just. It's not necessarily. You could do a medieval setting where it could be like where there is very very little magic, versus a medieval setting, quasi medieval like most D&D campaigns. Maybe that's the other end of that Forgotten Realms, Galarion. Yeah, and low magic doesn't mean you can't have powerful casters. It just means not
It's not
everybody.
widespread.
Yeah, and there's not every adventurer group doesn't have 17 magic weapons per character.
So you could in this tech level, you can also kind of set or not in D&D all like Bronze Age, Iron Age, Renaissance, all of that's kind of mushed together. So
Mm-hmm.
across time, you saw armor developing,
Mm-hmm.
and then weapons, kind of an arms race between armor and weapons
Mm-hmm.
in a broad sense, right? And then once you get the muskets, it doesn't take that long for armor to just fall out of favor, because if someone has a musket and they get especially if they get close to you,
Mm-hmm.
your armor may not matter a whole lot. So how do you even worry about that for your tech level?
Well,
you just mush in all the different armors and weapons that D&D has and not worry about it.
Well, I think Boivin onto that a little bit. He talks about historical settings work well. His comment originally was this, and it may be something we should think about. Some good points. A good setting is one, in his opinion. This is Mr. Boivin of Reactionary Principle Gaming. Check out his YouTube channel. Easy to learn. Two, logically consistent. And three, allows players assumption. Oh, right. So they assume that, okay, when I go to this next town, money's going to be basically the same. I understand how to interact with things. I'm not shocked if a wizard casts fireball, or I am shocked. Yeah, I got
Right.
you.
You probably shouldn't change a whole lot, like gravity works there like it works here, that kind of
Yeah.
thing.
I do think that historical settings would be great for giving a care about armor versus weapon versus armor type, the progress of weapons of technology levels in relation to weapons of warfare. I think if you're in a highly magical world, and I mentioned it before, there was a Dragon magazine article on it, where if you're in a highly magical world, standard war practices wouldn't be like they are. You wouldn't just bring up my 5,000 men are going to come in with, like Lord of the Rings style orcs putting their ladders up, trying to climb up over the wall. I mean, they could, but the truth is you'd be facing wizards and clerics, and you better have some counter magic or you're in trouble. War and technology would be vastly different depending upon the magic level of the world. But if you want to,
And of that settlement,
yes,
right?
correct,
So if you
correct.
have a couple of settlements that are at war and they don't necessarily have a lot of wizards or other
Yep.
special guys, they're going to be more conventional. But if someone got a clue at some point to do guerrilla warfare with your
Hmm.
character types,
Yep.
right? You have your little troubleshooter group of 7 characters, and they figure out where the general of the army is at, and then they just go um, assault that tent, get in there and kill the general. Then guess what? That army that can't function without a general, they're done.
Yep. Absolutely. That need a commander. They don't. They only work with tactical situations, and they got to have. And they got to have the captain. They got to have lieutenant. They got to have the sergeant who runs the small unit. And yeah, true. But I think the technology level would be interesting. I wonder with Darthiac's idea though, and I've been playing with this. I love the idea of a world where maybe there's scientific um, advancements. Sorry, my tea bag had broke, so I was getting some, tea bag yuck into my drink. Um, Scientific advancements like alchemical potions that aren't magical, or truly medicine. What if you let medicine advance where, maybe potion makers can actually eventually make something like, I don't know, antibiotics.
I
ah,
think, yeah, I think someone brought up low fantasy gaming an episode or two ago, but that's still cool. Look up low fantasy gaming for a setting in which it's more of the dark ages, low magic, but you still have casters.
and Patrick's talking about a book. There is a book also
A book,
called Low
low
Fantasy
fantasy gaming.
Gaming.
Yeah,
I have the PDF and I have a supplement, but I don't have the actual hardback. Um, Our man said one idea he was toying with was a more civilized place was that the more civilized a place was, the less magic worked. So cities and castles were fairly magic free. The wilderness was powerful magic. The idea being that in the city, things are starting like almost like in those fairy tales. If you don't believe, it can't work. It sounds silly, but like in a world that's more in a city where things are more industrious and more, maybe that's where science could come in. Maybe science is stronger and people just don't believe as much. Whereas when you're out in the wilderness, anything could happen. So
well,
people
that
are
would
more scared.
probably be, yeah. The magic is probably more connected to nature
Yep.
in
It could
that
be
sort of setting,
correct.
right?
Yeah, that's not a bad idea either. That's a pretty unique spin on the level of magic. So you could have it all there, right? You
Well,
could have
in that really not good, I wish it was better cartoon movie called Wizards.
yes. It's been so
So it
long.
was essentially technology versus magic was the theme,
Yeah.
and the magic guys were all kind of fairies, and it was more natural,
Hmm.
and the bad guys were more industry focused and factories and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so if you want to have, and there's an RPG out for that, but that's kind of the same kind of theme that you're talking about there, and
Yeah.
Arman's talking about, where cities have no magic or low magic, and the magic is stronger out in the wilderness because of its connection to nature. And
Yeah.
perhaps the fairies and stuff, they're whatever part of their realm empowers the magic. It has to be around that kind of thing, instead of where humans, who are apparently the bad people in a lot of these types of stories,
Yeah.
when they build cities, they just ruin everything.
Rape and pillage the land.
Yeah.
Patrick brings a more practical side to the interpretation. This is another interpretation. He says, Patrick Demo, I'd say that science is more accessible, and that it makes it diminish magic just due to numbers, right? People like, I understand if I take this particular chemical and mix it with that, it happens. I understand if I use this, it happens. And they can understand science better, but magic's too arcane, too hard to grasp. So maybe it's not that it's belief. It's just as people, I'm not bothering with that. I've got tech. I've got science to do this.
Yep. That's
There's a good question. Point Blank says, so if mages attack the city, would they be at a disadvantage? Good question. Depending on your interpretation, maybe not.
Yeah.
If it was Patrick's interpretation, no. But if it was mine, where I was thinking it was belief, yeah, maybe they would be.
Well, Arman, it says pretty much what I was saying. Oh, is that the one? Yeah. Could also be due to mana being a product of the Fae, which is essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
They are missing in a human civilization, right?
Both Darth and David Gwill said it makes them think of Magic and Mage the Ascension from White Wolf.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Or whatever that, there's a variety. Mage the Awakening. I don't know which one that is. So I'll take his word for it. I don't know what that is. It's one of the Mage games from White Wolf. Yeah.
Right. So none of these little nuggets we're talking about necessarily need to be a big consideration.
No, you just need to decide, where is your tech level going to be. Do you want to have, like Joe said, do you want to have all the arms and armor that are cool, which that's where I lean toward when it comes to them. And I want to have splint mail. I want to have chain mail. I want to have
just have them all and let the players
the long sword and the bow and let them do different damages. Though I enjoy how Horde Wars does their weapons. I mean, their weapons are interesting in that game. They actually can do more than just do damage. And I like all their materials. I like the weapons to be, I don't know. I think I got to think about that.
It depends on how much into the minutiae you want to get with the weapons.
Yeah.
All right. So that being said, another thing that you can think about is, how much does the average person know about the world around them, and how much do they get along with outsiders, as far as people not from their settlement?
Right.
So in other words, is it a more cosmopolitan, where people get around and they know each other and they're friendly? They don't really care if you're from 100 miles away or from their village. They don't care very much.
Right.
Points of light. Right. So you have a lot of settlements out there, but it's mostly wilderness in between.
So City A doesn't know where City B really is. Now, I've never heard of Cloakton.
Yeah, not necessarily.
Yeah.
And then maybe it's more provincial, where it's regional. So you have this little geographic area where people within it are familiar with their surroundings, but outside of it, maybe because it's landlocked, or maybe there's just too much wilderness between it and the next nearest provincial area region, and it's dangerous to go through it, so they stay where they're at. And there's not a whole lot of trade. So the other thing is trade. How much trade is there in between?
Would provincial be much different than Points of Light in your mind?
Points of Light are more like city states, so not big geographic areas for Points of Light. Provincial could be small.
It could just be there's a lot of towns that are isolated, but they're not Points of Light, because you could still have a kingdom, and a lot of the towns in the kingdom could be provincial, where every little town has its own little quirks about maybe their own version of the religion of St. Cuthbert may be different, or he might be worshipped by a different name or something like that.
Or it's not necessarily different nearby towns. Maybe it's regional. So this southern region versus this northern region.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I kind of like. Mac Thompson is saying. I think he's talking about Venice, Naples, yeah, Genoa, Rome. Yeah, gotcha.
Or in like China was before it was unified, or
Right,
Germany before it was unified, because nobody wanted Germany to be unified. So that's why there were a lot of wars over there.
right.
One of the reasons. There were lots of city states that were not unified.
I think of those three types we mentioned, I prefer. I think when I run, I tend to run a little more cosmopolitan, but it's not like every city has a little bit of everything and everybody loves each other and gets along. There will be a few places I always loved about Ravenloft was how most of the towns were pretty xenophobic, man. If you were a
No
stranger,
likey the outsiders,
no
right?
likey. And that's, to me, that adds a lot of challenge to the players outside of, I mean, yeah, your characters could come in and just kill everybody. We're all fifth level. We can murder this town of 200 people, but you're not going to. And if you need to get some business done there or you have an adventure, you may have to figure out a way to deal with these folks that think you're weirdos because you got an elf and a dwarf in your party. What the heck are you doing with an elf? Don't you know
Right,
those guys
right,
will curse you?
right.
Yeah.
And that depends on what folks know about the wider world.
Mm-hmm.
So it's possible they don't even have to have an elf in their town to know that elves aren't necessarily evil bastards that stab everybody in the back. All they
Right.
need is one person who's been out in the world and they set people straight. Yeah, elves are they're different kind of people. They're kind of weird, but they're
Yeah.
still
Some
they're
towns
okay.
and
It
some
depends on the one. There's some that are evil. There's some that are not.
and some towns might listen to that. Others be like, nope, my grandmother
Mm,
told me.
yeah,
You're full of crap.
but everybody agrees that all orcs are evil.
Right. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a campaign like that, I think if you're going to have vast histories and wars and stuff, I think you can have places that are a little bit like all that in your world. But I do think if you want to keep the tone rolling, if you want a world that's much more, the unknown and people don't really trust each other, points of light or provincial works well. If you want to
How
have,
many player races do you have?
oh yeah, that's a question.
Do you
Oh, there
have
you go.
the big four, or do you just have humans and everything, and just humans, or do you have the other, elf, dwarf, and gnome, and nothing else, or maybe halfling,
Yeah,
another kind of gnome,
you're right.
Lots of short people.
I'm leaning toward it. Yeah, that's a good question. You got to determine how. I mean, and if you make it, well, I think if you are going to have a lot of races, you might be. You wouldn't be hard pressed. You could have a lot of races even in a points of light setting.
Sure. The players are going to be whatever the players are, and when you
Mhm.
take a party with a dragonkin, uh, half demon, a sprite,
Mhm.
and one human, and they go around to different villages, they're probably going to have to run a lot because
Yeah,
everybody with their pitchforks are going to say, "Get the heck out of here, you monsters!"
Duncan Bradley quoting a little LOTR. Never trust an elf.
Right.
Well done. But yeah, so yeah, but I think it's important. I mean, for me, like right now in Mudsword, there's only 4 races. There's human, dwarf, elf, and halfling, and I'm not really sure I'm going to keep the halfling. He may go away. I'm talked to Martinson about it, and he said he's never been a big fan of those because they're really somewhere between a dwarf and kind of dwarfish. They're kind of not really, but sort of.
They're short humans.
Yeah, the short
Halflings are
people
short humans.
and gnomes.
They like to eat a lot.
I never really loved gnomes. So uh, if I was going to add another race, I would be much more likely to add a race like a giantish race. I always loved the Goliath. I love a big, massive sort of guy like that. It can be kind of cool. That would fit in the world.
Right. So what Point Blank says, what about a world without humans or where humans are not the dominant race like Dark Crystal? Well, Dark Crystal, you had human analogs. The Gelflings were pretty much human analogs, even though the females had wings.
I need to watch that movie. I've never seen Dark Crystal.
They're kind of fey, but I get what you're saying. Those are fine. It's all a matter of taste.
This would be interesting if where humans are a lost race in myth only. Almost like well, Planet of the Apes, they had humans, but I could almost imagine if the apes take over and almost all the humans are dead except for a few that are hiding out in the woods or whatever. Yeah, I
Right.
mean,
Well, I
I
think
don't think I
one
could.
version there were just like a few dozen, or just not very
Yeah,
many left because they were all killed.
but for point blank, I don't think I would do that. But that would be a really unique campaign, and people might really dig it. I've humans kind of. I guess I just can't. I got to ground. I need that grounding myself. I need to have humans in there because that's what I am, and it would be really hard for me to imagine what a world like that might be like.
The thing is, though, what ends up happening is most of the races still emulate everything that humans are
Right.
to one degree or another. They just have different skin,
Yeah.
different pointy ears. Maybe they're short, maybe they're tall, maybe they have wings, but they display all the range of human um, emotion and personality. So
But
I'm not sure what the point is in not having them, except just as far as your
conceptually,
aesthetic.
it's very interesting. I mean, the idea of not having humans, but it feels like to me, like even in Mud Sword, I'm going to have those races, but I want when I'm done, I want my dwarves and my elves to not feel like people. But I got to find things people can really hang their hats on how to play one of those guys that feels at least a little bit alien. But that might be hard for a person to do. So
Right.
we
But
talked
even
about
if you do something like, well, okay, uh, the Time Machine, the movie The
mm-hmm.
Time Machine,
Yeah.
the more recent one, they had a group of people that lived on. They didn't live in your typical town. They lived on the sheer side of a cliff.
Oh,
But but people did that in the past too, just not in great numbers, and that all died out for one reason or another. They just dug into the side of the cliff face and made their dwellings on top of each other. They might have had that a little bit in Planet of the Apes too, perhaps. I can't remember for sure. I didn't watch the more recent version of that, but I'm thinking of a scene I saw.
this is a definite possibility. Arnman says this. Without humans, the world will be harder to design and run from the point of view Mr. Boivin made concerning familiar logic assumptions and such. Yeah, it would be a challenge if you made it super alien. Your players might have a hard time grokking the setting. Maybe not with elves and dwarves if you leaned into some of the classic tropes. Elves are aloof, dwarves are dour, but
Well, yeah, but that's very light. So
that's very
um,
light.
that's very light. But if you're what she's talking about assumptions is when you hit a settlement, what does it look like? Right? With human settlements, they're very similar. They're they're all basically on the surface. They have box shaped houses for the most part. Um, and we're all familiar with what a human village would look like. But
Right.
what would one of these non-human village look like that would set them apart from a human village? So if you just basically say there's no humans, but
Mm-hmm.
you replace just the beings,
Mm-hmm.
but keep
With
all the other things: horses,
mm-hmm.
wells, houses, castles, swords, armor. You keep all the other stuff, and you just switch out humans, and they don't exist. Are you really doing anything?
Yeah. And Dar says in his mind, the only reason to have humans is to show how different the other races should be from humans, not that people follow it all the time. Yeah, I mean
Yeah, because it's
that's
hard
a
to
good
do.
reason. It is hard to do. Yeah,
I
Mac
mean, you can
Thompson.
do it in a movie or a story or a TV show or a comic book, but when you're sitting around the table and playing,
Yeah,
when you present, the DM can do it more when he presents his world
his
than the
NPC. Yeah,
players will end up doing when they run their characters.
player character is going to play characters. I mean,
Yeah,
they're going to do what the PC is going to be PCs, right?
right.
So I like what Mac Thompson said, though. He goes, he's thinking outside the box. You might need to delve deep into actual mythology to get a very unhuman, non-human feel to them. He said, like Norse.
Probably.
I mean, like I think I don't know, Patrick. Demo, you might know. Were you the one that came up with the idea of? Was it me or you or Joe? I know we've mentioned it of elves being born from pods of plants. That's actually where they come from. Make them
Oh,
plant
that's
creatures.
you might have heard that from Pat.
Yeah.
but that's a thing. That's a thing
Oh,
that's
okay.
in
Mm.
one version of
One.
mythology or another.
Yeah. So how would a plant creature act? Probably not
Right.
very human. You know. And the best you could do is overlay your ideas. But that's okay. You're building the world. You can make it whatever you want. Yeah. I think that's an interesting take. And maybe Patrick was the one too that mentioned the idea that as a dwarf ages, their skin slowly turns to stone. So that when a dwarf dies, what happens is he becomes a statue.
Hmm.
He becomes a rock formation. That'd be pretty weird. That's kind of
Yeah.
cool though.
And what if their spirit actually lived on after they turned to stone?
Oh.
Mm.
Our man wants elf spray for his garden. He don't want no stinking elves in there. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, Zan. Okay, so the cool thing about Farscape is they had lots of different races and they had behavioral differences. Right, they
Yes.
all acted right. So Zan, but in saying that, they weren't non-human.
I don't think
Right,
I knew that. I loved Farscape. He said her race was
a
evolved.
plant.
That's the blue chick, right? Zan
Blue
was the
chick
blue
was a
chick.
plant, but she
And
was a
she,
peacenik. Right.
that the actress was too. I met her at
Two.
Gen
Yeah,
Con.
they were both peaceniks, though she got turned into,
No, the lady who played her was. I met her at
yeah,
Gen
yeah,
Con.
yeah,
She was.
vegan.
She's a
Yeah,
nice lady, but kind of a woohoo
yeah, yeah, yeah.
kooky.
Right. And the
Oh,
one
that's where I
short
got it.
girl, I can't remember what's the short girl's name in that.
The short blue girl that came at
Yeah, she
Chiana.
was just a
Chiana was that her name?
Gianna. Yeah, she was just slutty,
Yeah.
pretty much. She had her weird body movements, but
Now she was super cool at Gen Con.
hmm?
She was a cool chick. David Gwill says he said he had dwarves turned to stone. Okay, that's where I saw it. All right, cool.
And, Dargo was just um, aggressive.
Yeah. And
So they weren't.
Rigel was a dick.
Rigel was greedy. Yeah, greedy. Yeah,
Yeah, Gigi,
yeah. Gigi something.
Wrigley, Geekly, but she was super cool at Gen Con. She
Yeah,
was
yeah.
good. She
So,
was
but
not
the
a butthole.
emotions and the behaviors that they displayed were human. They were maybe accentuated, right?
Yeah. And to be fair, Virginia Hay was cool too. She was just an odd duck.
Right. Sebaceans
Yeah.
were the human. They were
Sounds right.
actually the Sebaceans ended up. They were genetically engineered from human stock
Right.
to live in space, and
That
heat was a
was
bad thing for them.
Erin Soon, wasn't
Yeah,
she one? That was
Aaron
her,
Sue.
right? She
Yeah,
was a
yeah, yeah.
Sebacean. That's right. Yeah.
They
Wow,
were kind of
Farscape.
aggressive as well.
I should watch that again. I really enjoyed the crowd. I love Rigel. He was hilarious.
Yeah, it's hard not to think this. Dargo was a ripoff Klingon, kind of, sorta.
Farscape was a fun series, though. It
Yeah,
was
it
fun.
was.
It was fun.
I like the living ship,
Oh
living
yeah,
starship thing that they had going.
yeah.
That was pretty cool.
Moya, that was cool.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. All right.
So it's hard
hmm
to have people role play non-humans or demi-humans in such a way, and I've talked about this before, that they come off as not human, or
hmm
unless you super accentuate something.
Yeah.
And that's fine. That's fine. If that's what you're going to go with, that's fine. Because how much of that are you going to do? How hard are you going to work to make your character seem not human if you're not playing a human?
Yeah. And our man makes a good point. He says the more races you have for characters to play, the more place you need to design in your setting. Yeah, you got to find a place for them, even
Mm-hmm.
if it's like they're super rare or something. So
Oh,
yeah,
sure.
I may have to watch Farscape over the break. That's what I might do. That's cool. All right.
Okay, so the next thing I have here is, what is the world like physically? Is it basically Earth,
Right.
or do you have anything fantastic about it? I like there to be some kind of, even if it's just one thing that's weird about it, that's not Earth-like, something that makes it contrast from Earth, and that's
Something-
really easy compared to having cosmetically different sentient beings act different from humans, which is kind of hard and not worth it, in my opinion. It's really easy to have features about the world that you're gaming in that are not Earth-like,
Yes, it's very difficult.
or that are maybe it's just big, like trees that are a mile, 10 miles tall, or reach into the upper atmosphere. Right?
Um,
That could be something.
yeah, or I could, yeah, like you could have a, well, um, you could. I've always loved the idea of like there's a Savage World setting called Sundered Skies, where the planet, the gravity, has been partially destroyed, and so you basically just have floating islands all over the place. That's all
Oh,
the
and
world
no
is.
mainland.
No main land exactly. There might be a bigger
Oh,
chunk of an island. That's always kind of cool. That's a massive change. So you have to get around on airships, and it could add a real fantastical feel to the world just by doing that. Or I had a world one time that was made up of just islands. It was mostly water. Um, Point Blank says the entire world is on the back of a Titan. That could be
right,
interesting if
and
the players discover it.
right. There's what's the series of novels where the world is flat. It's a flat plane that's carried by a turtle,
Oh yeah,
and the turtle has something holding it up, and I can't remember that what that part
is that an
is.
elephant? I can't
Yeah,
remember.
maybe it's a giant turtle with elephants on an elephant on each foot
There's a book series,
flying through
pretty
space.
famous, pretty famous book series. Is
Yeah,
it
I
the
can't remember that.
Xanth novels?
That sounds Xanth.
Not Xanth. Okay, I can't remember. I mean, Xanth is quirky enough for that to be true. Four elephants. Okay, okay. Five
Discworld.
elephants. Ah,
Thank you,
okay.
Rejoice.
Yes,
Thank you, Joyce. Yes,
yes. And
Discworld.
Point Blank called it. And
So
Patrick.
Discworld, because it's a disc, the world is a disc carried on the back of an elephant, which is carried by back of a turtle, which is carried by elephants. Something
Ah,
like that.
Martinson says Farscape is streaming in Peacock, all four seasons and the movie. Excellent. Hmm. Yeah, so I mean, I think to me you should have something in there, even if it's just some really strange, like I love in 13th Days they kind of go over the top with it, but like there's a crack in the earth that leads to the abyss, and it's blocked by the body of the great gold worm. That's pretty cool.
Right, that
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
Yeah, world wound.
The world wound. I think that's what it's called in Galarion, the world wound. They have a
Yeah, yeah.
similar thing. That's fun stuff. Yeah.
And so I have something similar to that, sundered earth or sundered skies,
Yeah.
but you have your regular world, but you also have those floating either islands, castles, mountains, whatever.
Oh, classic cloud castles from old D&D with
Yeah.
cloud
Cl-
giants up there and
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's cool
You go
stuff.
up high enough, the clouds actually have cities maybe in them.
Yep.
Maybe the world is, Earth is so big, the world that
Mhm.
you're gaming in is maybe 20 times the size, but
Mm.
still has the same physics that Earth does somehow through magic or whatever. So your sky, the amount of sky that you have from the surface of the Earth or of the planet to the where it touches space, may be also way bigger.
Yep.
Although it may not, you could do it either way,
Yeah,
normal or big.
Point Blank brings up that 13th Age has three worlds, if you will, the overworld, the underworld, and then the actual Dragon Empire world itself. Yeah, it's
Right.
it's highly it's if you want inspiration, the 13th Age book is great to read for setting material. They just really got to me it's almost a little too crazy at times, but there's no reason. I mean, they always say this can be true or not. So you don't have to have all they're just here's some crazy ideas, run with it. And that's an interesting way to write a book. I think that's an interesting way to write a setting book. Joe and I have talked about we might would want to do something like that. Should we make
Yeah.
one where
And you don't need to do all of these things. You take one or two
yeah,
concepts and you run with them.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You don't need to have 5 different fantastic
Locations.
locations within
Right.
your village and every village that you visit, but
Yeah.
having a few that's well known that your characters might end up visiting sometime would be cool.
Yeah.
So this is some other considerations are this might be more rulesy than setting,
Yeah.
but are you going for more of a simulation or an emulation? Right. So how tied to real world facts is your setting, like how armor works versus weapons. So some online debates or online
Oh yeah.
demonstrations have shown that arrows against well-made heavy armor, they just bounce off,
Or shatter.
right? Or shatter.
Hmm.
And that's just bows made in those times, just basically made out of wood.
Well,
I'm not talking about crossbows
mhm.
or compound bows that we have these days.
Right. And
Here,
your setting could inform that. I mean, if
yeah.
you really like a style where you're worrying about, oh, sorry, dude, hold on. I got to do some.
Okay, have fun with that, Randy. So yeah, so how accurate do you want it to be according to whatever expert that you're listening to about how these things work, or do you just not worry about it?
I think Joe feels my pain. You can guess what happened.
Oh, cramping.
Cramp
Awesome.
City, dude. Joe and I being like these incredibly muscular, amazing athletic men, we're like LeBron James. We have cramps sometimes, So
I've
I don't
got a
know what
LeBron
happened.
James hidden somewhere under this fat.
Me too. I don't know what it is, dude. God, that was a big muscle cramp. I don't know. I didn't do anything today. I did work out yesterday morning. I'm going to tomorrow. So sorry,
Right.
guys. That's when you saw me grimace. I was like, and Joe's like, I know what that is.
Have fun with that. So
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
in economics, are you going to be worried about that too much? Or are you just going to try to emulate it some and
Yeah,
hit the highlights? Essentially, in essence, hit the highlights and not worry about all of the details. How much of the minuscule little points do you want to do?
that's been that's been a problem I've come back to over the years. Joe knows it. I I love the idea of a well-defined economic systems where you're on a silver standard because that's more like quote unquote the real world. But the truth is, we're playing a super fantastical. I also am elder. I appreciate a setting like what's in Horde Wars. You just get what you get, and the money is what it is, and let it go. Yeah, I think to
So
me, I'd want
you
to do
rob a horde and you bring back a bunch of money. Does it change much?
right.
And don't worry about it.
I, I'm inclined to do something with that, but not to go crazy. I don't want to,
Right.
like, I'm not sure I could do, I didn't, I haven't kickstarted Acts, though it's crossed my mind because the books look like they're going to be beautiful, Acts 2. But I think he's big into economics and setting up super detailed worlds, and it would be interesting to read, but I don't know if I want to pay $150 or $175 to just read the materials. I'm pretty sure I won't play it. So, unless it's someone can tell me, oh my God, that's the best system in the known universe. And some folks might think that.
And hyper detailed is what some people like,
Mm-hmm.
and hit the highlights is what some other people like, and some people like something in between, or maybe they focus on a particular thing. Like, I don't know why you would, but focus on economics, or they focus on how effective certain weapons are against certain armors. How long does it take for you to travel across the country? Get super detailed. Horses go this fast, boats go that fast, and fly spell, and all this other stuff. You can get as detailed as you like, or you can just say, hey, it takes a few days and not worry about it.
Yeah. Patrick made a comment here, and I want to talk about his and Mac's reply. One of my settings, Patrick says, has the entire world as floating sky continents and all intercontinental travel via airships. And then Mac Thompson, what do the sky continents float over? I think in Sundered Skies, it's a kind of a blue sky in general, but he makes a good point. There has to be a gravity well of some sort. Well, if we're going to get scientific, that doesn't have to be, it's magic. But, in a real setting, there'd have to be some center to that world that's quote unquote exploded and broken into pieces
Right. Or
to
what
keep
you
them
do is,
close to the center together as a planet. But yeah, I don't
right.
know.
So you say this is what they do.
Yep.
You don't worry about the how.
Right.
And gravity works the way you think it works in the locality in where you're existing. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So if you jump off the edge of one of these things, there might be some funky things that happen. Most of the time you die.
What if you plane travel?
And then plane travel, right?
What if the sky is just portals? So but you got to be careful with that because then how the ships fly. But yeah, I don't know.
Oh, what do you mean? I don't understand what you're getting at.
I was saying if you fell off an island, what if you keep falling till you landed in another world?
Oh, that's possible too. Yeah, so you can just figure out this is what it does.
Or imagine
Maybe
if you
have a 10% chance of plane traveling, 9% chance of just dying.
Or what if the center was a sphere of roiling blackness that was caged in by magic, and it was a
Sphere of
portal?
annihilation.
Yeah, sphere of annihilation, and it caused the gravity and allowed interplanar travel. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so you don't want to change gravity because why? Right? So
Well,
on the island when you're
mhm.
walking around,
Oh, right.
you got to stick to the ground.
Yep.
If there's no gravity, you don't stick to the ground,
Mhm.
and you're not held down. Nothing works right. Bows doesn't work right. Maybe your spells might work right, but certainly not swinging weapons. You start swinging, you don't know how to act. So for everything to work, at least on your island,
Mhm.
that needs to have its own gravity. You
But
don't need to worry about
you
what
could
makes
hand wave the rest. Yeah.
hand wave what makes it work, unless you want to say that there's something special on the center of all of these islands that makes it work, or there's some overriding magical field that makes it all work for everything, and then just say that's what it is.
Yeah. Ooh, I like this. This is highly magical. Point Blank says, "What if the floating islands had teleportation gates? No ships necessary. You can ride a horse right through. That would be that would be highly magical. That would be interesting. I like that.
What if
Oh,
these teleportation gates, maybe they're not in common use,
right.
so maybe they're owned by the Wizards Guild,
Mm,
or just in some places the wizard, the highest level wizard or a particular wizard owns the teleportation circle
hmm.
or arch, because who else is going to make it unless it's naturally occurring?
Right.
Someone's going to guard it, and you have to do something, either pay them or do a favor to earn access.
Darth's got a cool idea. Make the land masses like that of an asteroid belt, and they just float along basically in space. Atmosphere is covered by magic. Yeah, and what if some big bad evil guy decides to mess with that magic? That could be cool. That could be an epic campaign. I always think epic.
Nobody's sticking to the ground anymore. Oh no, we all have to use rope to tie us down.
Right. Yeah.
But if there's no gravity, if there's no atmosphere, there's also no air. So
Right. Well,
I mean,
and we can get into much physics.
you have to hand wave so much stuff. There's no atmosphere and there's the sun there, you're going to get cooked, or you're going to get irradiated. So you might as well just hand wave as much of that stuff as you possibly can.
Uh well, and or not. I mean, if you want to
Or
get
not.
off, if you're a
Roll your
physicist, or
character. 10 minutes later, you die because for radiation.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, what about? Oh,
is
yeah.
that where you got your Sundered World from?
No, Sundered Skies is a Savage World setting written a long time ago. I got a couple of copies of the books. It's kind of interesting, but David's told me about his Sundered World a little bit before, just a little bit about it.
Cool. All
Oh,
right. So
Duncan Todd's got a good point. We should say something about people subscribing. We've been
we
blabbing
haven't
for
said
an
anything
hour.
about doing the things, have we?
We have. We really should pause. We got such great topics and content.
Hey, subscribe, like, share, tell your friends and your enemies about the show. They can sit here for a couple hours and talk about these things with us. Get
Right
them
on.
in the chat.
Get them in, baby. Good chat.
Bring them to Big Geek Con next year.
Yes, I got to get thinking about that. I need to make some plans. I want to be ahead of the game this time, way ahead of the game. So, Big Geek Con will be happening to the Wrath of the Immortals.
Right.
I don't know what
Okay,
it's going to be
so
called.
we've talked about some of these next points here. Playable races. Are they
Mhm.
friendly or at odds? You put
Yeah.
a note in here about Tolkien.
Yeah, I mean, that's where do you want to do halflings, dwarfs, and do they want to be Tolkien-esque, or do they want to be something a little more exotic?
Or the
Right.
cannibal halflings from Dark Sun.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, right. Or
I mean,
moles.
that's Tolkien-esque taken to 11.
Mm-hmm.
They like to eat.
They do. Now they like to eat people.
Yeah. How big a deal is magic? We talked about that a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to have psionics?
That's a question folks have. Yeah, that's the thing you should consider. Is there going to? I mean, we could go deep. We talked about magic systems, but you could decide: are you going to have a variety of magic systems? I mean, are there going to be, third edition, sorcerer types? Are there going to be scions that use mental magic? Are there going to be an actual? But now you're getting into mechanics. But even flavor wise, if you want to have
Yeah,
all
yeah,
these different versions of magic, you could have. They could be competitive. They could all work together. It could be colleges that teach all these different forms of magic. Yeah, I mean that's a thing to think about.
right.
Yeah. The next one's a big one. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So David Will says, and this is a question we always pose to each other: if you can make psionics meaningfully different from wizard magic, I say go for it.
Right. And if you can't, don't bother.
It's just
That's
magic,
where that's where third edition and 3.5 failed, in my opinion.
right? S-
Psionics was
Um,
they messed with the mechanics, but it was just magic in a different way.
Psionics or psychics in science fiction settings are essentially like the telekinetics, mind reading, teleportation, that side of things.
Mhm.
Anything with TELE in the front of it.
Yeah.
Uh, Nothing exploding, generally speaking. Let's talk about scanners.
Yeah.
They ended up setting fire to each other, but they're wizards without material components or wiggly fingers or words or whatever. Except
Yeah. Killraven, sort of right. He says there was good. That was the good thing about 2E psionics. For all its fault, it did feel different than magic, especially 1E psionics, when they were
right.
talking about all the weird. Oh God, what were they called? Um, Attack modes and defense
Attack
modes.
and defense modes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you were in a kind of a psi-scape when you fought sonic monsters, and then you always lost because they were always more powerful than you were. So you always
Yes.
got stomped by the sonic monsters.
And Dart, this kind of connects to something Dar said before. He said, "Did magic actually develop? Was it psionics instead, or just tech?" So, what if the science cities? Let's marry a couple of ideas. We'll take Arnman's city with technology that's scientific or more like non-magicy. What if in the wilderness there's more wizards, but in cities, since they rely on tech, maybe they learn to develop their minds. They actually become Professor X style scions, right? Not that powerful, but that style.
So yeah, so 3E, that was before 3.5. 3.5 went the other way.
Mhm.
You get power points, you could boost your powers. You didn't get a lot of power points, and most of the psychic powers sucked.
Yes.
In 3.0. Yeah.
In
3.5,
3.0,
they flipped that to being the best caster
yes.
class, hands
In
down.
3.0, scions were weak sorcerers,
Yeah.
and sorcerers were already weak wizards. So in 3.0. But I like that better than 3.5. 3.5 scions just became better than everybody.
Yeah. Well,
They didn't have all the coolest powers, but dude, they got so many powers per day. It was insane.
you got a lot of power points, and your powers scaled, and you can do all this other stuff too. You know,
Yeah.
just like a wizard, but better.
Mhm. That was a theme for a while during third edition.
Yes. Level 1 psychic power was being able to conjure crossbow bolts.
Woo! I'll just go buy one for a couple gold, thanks.
Yeah. Take them off the goblins.
I like your next question though.
Are there gods? And how involved are they in the day-to-day activities of the mortals? That can set a very different tone if you most of the time it's ignored.
To me, it's not though. I mean, I
Mhm.
think about the deities in my settings. I'm not necessarily fond of them being playing every day to day with the people, but I want them to be there. I think 13th age, the gods are too far away. The cleric is just the generic cleric, the goody goody or the bad guy. And I don't like I don't I prefer to well define my deities, at least a handful of them. I don't like 5,001 deities like in the Forgotten Realms, but I like to start with a few and then bring in, like in Mudsword right now, I've got a few deities. You've heard me say the names like Lohas and a few others. And then I have these rarer cults that are the old gods. I've always loved that idea of gods and
Sure,
old gods.
sure,
And
sure.
I
Especially if the
personally,
old gods are like the great old ones.
yeah, that's cool too.
Yeah,
Or it doesn't matter.
yeah.
They can be thought of that way. I mean, to me, that's important in a fantasy world. I want to have deities. Now, do I want to have clerics? I mean, as a character class, maybe not, but I do like the idea of of deities for me, but I think that's a question you have to answer. How important are they going to be? I would guess Joe, if he was running a setting, would probably not as put as much emphasis on that syllable.
Yeah. So, what is the big deal about the cleric hate?
What do you mean?
Why don't you want clerics?
It's not hate. I I don't. I like the idea of a
You want
priest.
them to disappear. That's kind of hateful.
I want them to exist. I'm not sure I like them as a class. I mean, that's not the right phrasing. Right now, I'm actually actively trying to find a way to slide them out of the game as being a character class. I realize they fill a role, but I wonder if they're going to be needed when I'm done. The holy guy can be the paladin, who I love. I love a Templar type guy. And since most versions of D&D, the cleric spells, not till third edition, they weren't really all that great. They were helpful, but they weren't like, oh my God, you're going to destroy these creatures with this spell. I don't know. I'm not sure if they couldn't just be done as you mentioned last week, as a healer wizard guy, as a wizard guy who heals. But I do like the idea of God, so maybe I've got to do something with them. I don't know.
All right. Well, okay. So how involved these guys are is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have either avatars of the deities or the deities themselves walking around and talking to people or blowing things up, getting involved in the mortals' day-to-day activities in a direct way, that's going to be a much different feel for your world than perhaps, hey, we kicked this thing off and we said, hey, this looks good, but we're out. We have a conduit to us if you want to gain, cleric abilities or whatever, but we're pretty much, hands off.
Mm-hmm.
It's a totally different feel for your world.
Yeah. Point Blank is agreeing with me. He goes, I agree with Randy. Make a Crusader class and priests are NPCs. But Mac Thompson says, priest haters, we're sinners and infidels. Yes, I am a sinner, but thank goodness for Jesus, so I'm still forgiven.
But
so
we are infidels.
I'm an infidel. That's fair.
Yeah.
That's a fair analysis. And our man suggests making a shaman class that includes healer. Yeah, maybe so. I don't know yet. I mean, I don't hate the priest, but I just feel like he's not. I feel like he'd be better off not being the cleric. Was better not being in class.
Well, David Gwill was putting it in a way such as having a wandering priest sounds kind of weird. It doesn't if the priest is supposed to be evangelical and go around and make a lot of converts. But in a lot of these games, the existence of the gods and salvation's not a thing.
Right.
So spreading the word isn't a thing. So you don't need to have itinerant priests going around converting people. So why would they be out there? Their function is more community based. So they stay home and do the healing. They stay in their temples and dispense with miracles if that's what the deities allow them to do, or maybe they do human sacrifice because that's what their deity wants. But traveling around being evangelical doesn't make a lot of sense.
No. Armin, I like this take. I would have religion and politically powerful religions. Whether the gods really exist is only known by the DM. You could them out, and what I'm thinking of, that could be the case. I've always liked the idea of, a church, because if you use D&D strict alignments, you can't have an evil cleric sort of hiding out in a good church as like a fake priest. But it'd be cool if you could have,
unless he was really powerful or had
unless he was Palpatine hiding amongst the Jedi or that level. Yeah. Point Blank, well, he and I are copacetic. Honestly, I hate bards as a class too. I do find bards kind of ridiculous.
What if they were cheerleaders?
Playing music in a dungeon is kind of dumb, except for the kind of part. It's totally dumb. Now, bard as a profession, that's okay. That's what I do. But like the bard class is weird, giving you bonuses because he's singing. I mean, I get that it could be a thing, but
magical music, inspiration.
Well, I have a class I'm thinking about, an elven blade singer that I'm working on that's going to have some of that sort of ability. But he's going to be the closest I'm going to come to a bard, but he's not going to be a bard.
Along too.
Yeah, Mac
Okay,
Thompson says
so
the apostles. He said the apostles traveled a lot.
stop it.
No, I'm never stopping. They traveled extensively, evangelizing. Yeah,
Yeah,
but they weren't like were
that's
they
how
going
they were.
on?
They were supposed to spread God's word, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And the religions in most of these games, that's not what they're about.
It
You're
doesn't
born
seem like
into
it.
your religion. You don't spread it. You don't get converts.
Yeah.
Cults do that in these
Hmm.
type of
Hmm.
settings or certain types of settings like this, especially if
How?
they're old gods that were kind of ignored and they want to have a resurgence. So they send out priests, perhaps. But
You could have.
evangelism was pretty much a Christian thing.
Yeah, it was. It's hard to. I don't think there were too many priests of ISIS going around trying to convert people. But
Nah.
I mean, it's fine. It works fine if that's what if you're going to have clerics. You can say that's what I do. I think there was an evangelist. Was it a prestige class from 3.0? There was an
It probably
evangelist,
was.
a prestige
Right.
class. So yeah,
The idea of a D&D cleric spreading the word of their god doesn't make sense to me.
maybe. I see him more as a Templar, fighting for the faith, being a champion. That's more of a paladin in my mind. Max says I need to play priest better.
Why would anyone convert to Moradin? What does Moradin offer to a convert?
Blacksmithing skills.
Probably not.
He might offer it. If I was Moradin, I would.
Conversion has to offer something
Yeah,
for it to be meaningful.
yeah.
I mean, in a lot of games, the deity benefits from having more worshippers.
What did the worshippers get?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Why wouldn't they? Shah. I don't understand the Shah part, but
Yeah.
anyway, moving along.
Kill Raven. The default answer to was there a prestige class for X and 3 is yes. Agreed.
Yes. So we were talking about how do you do setting and then magic and then combat, or perhaps you do magic and then setting, then combat, or perhaps you do combat first as far as deciding what these things do. So what considerations overlap between setting and rules? I think they feed into each other.
I do too.
You don't necessarily have to start with one or another.
I would, me personally, I'm at the point, I want to start with a setting because I think about, like I told you last week, I think about rules that I like, and I got a bunch of them written down, but then I was like, why are they all like this? Just because they're game mechanics that I liked? Maybe that's a good enough reason to have them. But I would like to have a setting that,
See you, Tonka.
Oh, head out, dude. See you, man. But I'd like to, I like my setting to feed into the rules, but I agree that it can reverse flow too.
Yeah.
Rules can give you ideas. Ooh, I like that rule. I could make my setting do this to match it. Yeah.
They overlap and feed into each other, right?
Yeah, I think they do. So that's something that you may or may not want to consider. Some people are like, if you're like, I'm doing a setting for Dungeons and Dragons. I am playing Dungeons and Dragons in my setting. Then the rules might affect your setting significantly. Well, I got to have something for sorcerers to do. And I want to have all the races, so I've got to have that in my setting. I could see people saying, I'm making a D&D setting, and I want to be able to play with all the cool toys that are in the game. And so, yeah.
I'll tell you what, you're going to have a planet that continually grows.
Oh, you could. Why morphs.
Not? Because D&D changes, and even within a particular edition, so much stuff is added.
Yeah.
Just like Pathfinder.
Oh,
races and classes.
Let's say you wanted to play the core third edition.
Yeah.
I think there were 11 classes and 9 races or something.
You still have some development to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Darth agrees with you. He says without setting, you can't completely build the system. Without the system, you don't get the feeling of the setting. Yeah, I agree. But to me, I think I'm starting from setting. I want to start from setting because I want to know what I want in the world before I start worrying about which rules.
Everybody's going to pick a different point to start from.
Yeah. Good deal.
My point to start from is wizards are the best thing.
Correct.
What
That
if you had
sounds-
a setting where all the classes were casters of some sort or magical in some way?
You could have that.
Yeah.
That would be interesting. You
So,
could have a world that's highly magical, and everybody that's an adventurer has to learn some magic. There's, maybe there's even spells that commoners know.
so I would say all the classes have a magical quality to them because you need that to defeat the monsters who are constantly bothering people.
Only magical people can fight the monsters. Yeah, you could. And by magical, I mean in the broadest sense. They got some sort of
Broadest,
little
yeah.
magic. Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
Right,
point
right.
blank says it's called Earth Dawn.
Well, that's one. That's one.
Patrick said Earth Dawn too. He must want a drink. Fourth edition, says Martinson.
Fourth edition.
Yeah. Yeah. Hell, even fifth edition. Almost every character. Yeah, 5e. Yeah. 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 But truthfully, you get past 6th or 7th level, I think almost everybody becomes somewhat magical. Can't
You
imagine
can
people,
say that. Yeah.
yeah, hard to imagine doing what they're doing. Maybe an old D&D, not so much. Well, if you play, classic OSR and just quit playing every 3rd level, it could be mostly good. Everybody can be mundane. No
Sure.
magic at all.
Right. I mean, past first 5 minutes of your day, magic user casts his one spell, and then he's no longer magical. The cleric doesn't have any
Right?
until 2nd level. So
Right.
if you just play 1st level, it's
Yeah.
a pretty low magic setting.
Yeah, you have real low magic setting. In fact, you could just you could not allow magic users, and it'd be great.
Right. All right. So we are almost at the 2-hour mark.
Oh, I think we should push
We're
the next
probably going to
topic.
have to punt segment 2,
Sounds good.
especially because my
Dog.
doggie Elizabeth is starting to do her high pitched whining.
Right.
And she will
She's
start
going to
she will
piercing
start
our ears with her
Yes.
high pitchitude. All right, then I will start to head us toward the end. So I'd like to thank everybody for showing up tonight and chatting with us. If you'd like to support our show, do we have nothing in Big Geek Land, do we? I don't think so.
No.
Nothing to say.
No.
We'll talk about David.
I'm
Giles.
resolving some issues. Hopefully, we'll have some physical product being sold on there very soon from Horde Wars.
Yes, that would be awesome. If you'd like to support our show, check us out on PayPal, Streamlabs, Ko-Fi. Still Patreon going, Joe? You got something for those guys?
Yeah, I didn't turn it off yet.
Our website, you can check us out at www.biggestgeekuspodcast.com and the email at thegeeks@biggestgeekuspodcast.com. And the aforementioned Big Geek Emporium. That is a place you can find games of independent sorts, cool things, free things. And just subscribe and like and check us out on all the different cool platforms. We're mostly there. I jumped on X today and did some blabbering, but not too much. I need to learn how to contact people better. I'm not sure. I don't operate X very well. I got to learn how to operate that better. But yeah, so anything else you want to add, Joe, before we get out of here?
I do not.
All
have
right,
anything
guy.
else.
All right. Well, this is Randy.
And this is Joe.
And remember, if you can't be big like us, then be geeks like us.